What has been some of your experience in just getting adjusted to some of these ideas?
Gosh, I think at first, a bit like the last caller, it's like I would like to be at the finish line and have it all figured out. Um, and then I'm like, okay, well, that's not maybe not going to happen. So it's piece by piece, and it's been a lot of work actually. I've had to put a lot of kind of like it's almost like taking its own like it's like studying a whole new subject, but the subject is just the world. And so yeah, I've been doing a lot of that. I lost my train of thought. Where were we again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just that, I mean, it's not like one piece of yourself. I mean, it is in many ways, but that it really encompasses the whole world. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah, that's one of the big things like the autism like the autistic community will talk about is identity first language. Like all the books and everything's like person with autism. And then we get into the well, we can cure it. And it's like this weird idea that all autistic people are neurotypical people with like this added on piece of software. But it's like an entire way like the brain is and mapped out differently. So you can't take that away
Hmm.
and have like the same person. And I think like that's been kind of a lot of it has been like trying to figure out losing it again. My brain is just I'm not sure.
It's your brain's ears are burning. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
we're here to talk about in a lot of ways. What I am curious about in this like large worldview shift is how this has impacted your relationships. Like, obviously, you've talked about being more comfortable being yourself around friends, but there's a lot there, yeah.
Yeah. COVID has made that weird. I can say like for me, I like for like me and my husband, that has become night and day amazing, so much better than I actually thought it would be. Because for so long we kind of assumed that we were both kind of working from the same playbook and everything was kind of like on this even footing. But it's like discovering we were not so much not in on like the same page as even in the same like user manual. So I've been spending a lot of time learning about like communication stuff, like I guess I'll list like neurotypical communication. I did not know how bad I was at this until uh, people actually, because no one will ever tell you when you do something wrong. Apparently, that is rude. They just they assume you'll figure it out. So yeah, a lot of arguments. Like so for years, we've been together 18 years. So for a really long time, we've both kind of felt like we were like being gaslit by the other one because we would go into like a situation and it would go badly, but each person had like such an incredibly different view where each one of us was the asshole in one version. And so like just learning like communication stuff, and I'm not very good at like figuring out my internal workings. So like alexithmia, it's like I don't recognize other people's emotions very well sometimes, but I really don't do well with mine. And it is not real-time processing as a general rule. Um, it can take like weeks to figure out what the heck I felt like about on Tuesday. So I've been trying to figure out how my stuff works and then trying to explain it to him. And it's been making things a lot easier. Like just dumb stuff like if someone rings a doorbell and he's like, oh, Nikki's at the door. I'm like, yes, she is. Which comes across to him as me being an asshole because he's asked me to go open the door. And I think he's an asshole because he told me a thing, I agreed with him, and he's yelling at me. So, like that, I mean, if you think about how often that kind of interaction can happen in a day, it is a lot. So, like, I feel like we're actually starting to understand each other for the first time. Like, there were some really big fights that we would have regularly, and I had no idea why, and he had no idea why. So it's kind of really improved that. Like, we can communicate in a way that we understand, so we both get what we need out of it, whether it's the door being answered or, me getting my questions answered. I ask a lot of questions. A lot of autistic people ask a lot of questions. And I have learned that to a lot of people, that comes across as either manipulative or rude. Like, if someone's like, we're doing this, da da da, and you're like, okay, but why? And when? And what about? And everyone's like, stop trying to change. I'm like, I'm not. I just really, really want to know all of these things before I agree to the thing. And I want to make sure I'm doing it all right. But yeah, so like getting rid of all those little things, it's been kind of awesome. Like, I can talk to him, and now, like, I actually know what he's talking about. I thought I did and I didn't. And the same with him. Like, it's like almost like meeting each other again.
I love that.
Yeah.
And there's this weird thing where, like, people assume that if you have the perfect relationship, you don't need to communicate. Like, you just know, right?
Just
Like,
natural. Yeah.
And it's the same with sex, right? It's like, oh, you don't need to communicate. You'll just know. It'll just be this chemistry that runs through it, and all of a sudden you'll just like be on the same wavelength. No.
Why?
Good relationships, good friendships, good sex, all of it hinges on the ability to communicate with each other. And I think that puts a lot of people who might not be neurotypical at a very big disadvantage as well, because then you're like, oh, well, this is a normal relationship, right? Because we're communicating just as much as this other couple, and actually we need to be completely shifting and looking at it in a different way.
Like, I'm really scared and curious for post-COVID world, because like, relationships are difficult, like, your intimate relationships somewhere else, but like friendships and stuff, like, there's been like a lot of weird like walls and a lot of things that I've missed historically, which I'm starting to kind of understand better. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens. Like, I do pretty well, like, making sort of friends, like, where if we're in the same place, we will exchange banter. That's doable. People getting out of those conversations with me, it's a lot harder. They're just gonna have to walk away because we won't stop. But like, it's always been really difficult to get past that, and it's like everyone's best acquaintance. So like, understanding kind of some of the reasons those patterns have existed means that now, like, if I want to, I can try and like change the script a little bit and actually like deepen those relationships with people. Like self-disclosure is a big thing. Like, you got the small talk thing, which everyone hates. I hate and I'm bad at. Like, my idea of small talk that I thought I was really good at was, like, so existential question, like, what do you think happens when we die? Like, that's not small, apparently. That is really big talk. But people will talk about themselves, and I've now learned, like, you reveal a bit about yourself, and it's like a quid pro quo thing, but I've never really known how to do that. So it gets stuck where people will tell me like intimate stuff about themselves, and I'm like, oh, that's wild. Nothing back ever. So as a result, like, I think a lot of people think I have been very disinterested in getting to know them better, which is a lie. It's not a lie, it's wrong. Like, and I'm like sitting here going like, I don't know why no one will ever invite me out to the things unless I see them. And like, I'm like, oh, well, I never did this step. Or the one we're talking about, I think, before the show started, where I'm supposed to express interest so that they know I want to go, and that was the invite, but I totally missed it. Like, I get invited to a lot of pub quizzes though. But like, yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what happens when the world opens up again, and I can actually talk to people, and when they do the thing, I actually know what the thing they're doing is. That's going to be interesting. And I'm also kind of nervous too, because I don't want to put all the masks back on. It was very miserable and exhausting. So exhausting. And yeah, I like people, and I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but I I don't want to keep doing that. It was like literally killing me. So it's gonna be weird. Like everyone's had this like idea that is set. And I think when we go back out into the universe and their expectations will not be met necessarily, I don't know
Sure.
how that's gonna go. And I suspect some people will probably disappear, but people have been disappearing from my life anyway. But I think like I'll be able to actually bring a lot more people in and have them
And
actually know
show
who I
those
am.
people, yeah, show those people like a real version of you.
Yeah, like
Uh,
people give their summary like, "Oh, you're so ... And I'm like,
Am I?
no,
Did I? Yeah.
like not at all. And it's weird when someone you really care about, and they care about you too, but they have this person they care about isn't you, and it's a really lonely place to be because you've got all these people, but the person they like wasn't you. It was like
Mhm.
whatever construct they came up with. So you kind of like you can feel like totally alone around friends,
Yeah,
which is
forgive me if this metaphor is off base, but in so many ways, it sounds like you have been kind of given this secret code. Like all of a sudden, you see the Matrix, and it makes me think about those videos of folks who have a cochlear implant for the first time and are maybe
right.
hearing for the first time, and that can be very beautiful, but also incredibly overwhelming. And I guess I'm curious if this has been a stressful experience in that way, all of a sudden having like this filter, these sunglasses taken off on your world.
Yeah, it's been a lot to adjust to, and it's kind of like it's like I don't want to like change who I am, but it's like there's all this new information now, and I have to do something with it. And like normally, like we learn to do this slowly. You know, you're like 3, and you're like, "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" And someone's like, "Sure." I'm like, "Here's candy." Brilliant, got that down.
Transaction, done deal.
And then you kind of move up, and it's kind of like I'm like 40 now, so on this stuff I'm supposed to have like my PhD and be able to, I don't know, raise a child, and I'm like suddenly kind of finding myself trying to figure stuff out, like, hey, I want your candy and I want to be friends. So it's like, yeah, it's like starting from scratch, but you're expected to be an expert. I guess it's like adult learning. Like it always
Hmm.
sucks because you're used to being good at things, and now you got this thing, and it's like I want to be at adult stage now, but you still got to do like your years of practice.
Well,
So
and all of a
like,
sudden you've introduced this like code switching paradigm because it used to just be, a lot of masking. And now it's like, well, I'm going to intentionally put on this mask in certain circumstances, but that intention is using up a piece of your brain.
yeah, a lot of it too. Apparently, like someone like was like a psychologist, I don't know, one or the other, and they were talking about like the amount of like resources that, because we've got finite resources, which way you can't juggle and watch TV and read a book and hold a conversation and like try and shift your cat with your foot at the same time. Like your brain's like, we got this much to process, and eventually you run out of space, and like all of this space has just been used doing this like one thing, and badly. And so yeah, it's gonna, I mean, I guess maybe I've got the space to implement or like decode all the stuff I'm learning. I can like decode with the stuff that I used to spend not doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I love doing this, by the way. It's been really difficult to not do that for a long time. So that's kind of nice to have back. And I think people will probably not enjoy that, but yeah,
Yeah.
like it's weird. It's a lot of information, and
Well, and it's a new identity to try on and to kind of switch back and forth with and to understand. And I guess I'm very curious. Research seems to show us that people with an ASD diagnosis are more likely to identify as ace. We don't really know if that's entirely true about autistic people or if it's just sort of the way the research is skewing right now. We don't really understand why. And I guess I'm curious, as somebody who identifies as both, just how you keep those identities separate, or if they do feel related, or what that feels like for you.
yeah, that is actually something someone had brought up. on my Facebook, I think. It's kind of weird. Like, I think there is, like, a lot of people, asexual people, like to very much downplay that. But like my experience, like one of the reasons I started looking into possibly being autistic before all of this stuff happened was from meeting a lot of autistic people in the ace community. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I've done that all my life too. And it was like, okay, so I really resonate with this one group of people, which means there's a lot of those people. And yeah, like the numbers are higher, and a lot of people don't like that fact, maybe, but it does seem that they're higher. In fact, like I think research shows like autistic people are more likely to be like trans or non-binary or have like other like, you know, gender, and or just be a member, like another identity on like the LGBTQ, like,
or really just rejecting that you know, allosexual cis het identity that we mentioned earlier. And so, you know, it could just be that autistic folks are more willing or perhaps more able or have more of a necessity to be authentically themselves in these different ways. And so it's definitely a curiosity. But the two do go hand in hand for so many folks, and that's a challenging, I think, thing to keep in both hands at once.
Right. Like I think for me, I would say that like there's probably a link between the fact that I'm autistic and the fact that I'm asexual. Like a lot of like sensory processing stuff is very different, and I think I'd like talked about like difficulty recognizing like emotions and things like that, and a lot of social constructs. Like a lot of things about relationships are somewhat social. Like there's instincts there, but like there's no real inbuilt instinct that says, hey, to propagate the species, I'm going to buy roses. It doesn't make sense biologically. It's got to be a cultural thing. So I think like a lot of romantic like gestures and things like that are very social. So it would make sense perhaps that a lot of people on the spectrum maybe read things or look at things differently. Like they're not taking these like social constructs at face value. And I think like with the sex stuff too, like a lot of like the sensory stuff, like the side of like the autism thing, it's like everyone thinks about like loud noises, I hate them, and like bright lights and things like that. But there's like a lot of other senses, like you know, like proprioception, where the body is in space, and interoception, like what you can actually physically feel, like, you know, inside and what's going on. I am really bad with those ones. Like I got no idea what's going on in here, to be honest. And like I could see maybe that would have some role to play in how I'm asexual. Like everyone's like, but you could orgasm, right? And I'm like, I can. It's fine. And that blew my therapist's mind. She was like, never had someone say that, like, it's fine. It's totally great. But have you ever drunk a fizzy water and skateboarded down a hill? Like it's yes. So like maybe because I'm autistic, there's some, you know, it's the reward of sex isn't quite there for me. I don't know. And like one of the weird things about like autism specifically is everything is pathologized all the time. Like there was some research that came out this week. Someone did like a study about like, I guess like amoral behavior and money. And a lot of the people who are autistic would not take the money to do the thing that was against their ethics, even if it was an awful lot of money, which I might take away as a strong sense of, you know, a strong code of ethics. But the takeout was, does not understand social rewards. And it's like, really? I don't. So it's like everything ends up like fine. If it's different, it's bad.
Where did that come from?
So I think like with the asexuality stuff, if you got a lot of autistic people who identify as asexual, then the medical community is going to want to put it back in like the, you know, DSM, whatever comes next, as a problem again, because now it's like a thing to be cured and you can't be asexual, you're autistic. It's a symptom, not a. But the thing is like my experience of the world is my experience of the world. So I experience the world as an asexual person. Doesn't matter if I'm also autistic, because that's still like these two things still can exist separately as well as together.
Go together, sure.
And I think like it seems to be a thing people like to do. If some like a lot of like the autistic trans people, oh, you can't possibly know, you don't understand enough about the world to know that you're a boy or a girl. I was like, yeah, you still know how you feel about things. Like maybe
The frustrating thing to me is that all of these words are just descriptions of how people feel and function, right? Like, it's like I am using these words because they best describe what I am. It's not that there is no prescriptive weight to these words. Like, you are ace because that's what you are. It doesn't matter how you get that. That's who you are.
And it's like, you can't take away the autism. So even if the two are linked, what does it matter? I'm never going to be without one, so I'm never going to be without the other. So why does it matter? Like the social ramifications are still the same. And I think that's something that like I understand why it gets, but it's like the concept of the gold star asexual. That's someone who is young, so it's not a sex drive thing. Able-bodied, so it's not just like physically thing. They're neurotypical and mentally healthy and all of these things, and then no one can like touch them. But like the moment someone is say like
it's everywhere.
It stops being considered valid.
And it's like if you're old, you're like, oh well, you're too old. Or if someone is considered undateable, it's like, oh, it's because you can't find somebody. And it's like, no, you can be asexual and literally it can intersect with any identity at all. And I get why like the community sometimes downplays it, because I think it only got taken out of like the DSM like in the last edition. And even then it's like these blah blah blah, this is still a disorder unless they self-identify as asexual. So we're on that kind of like iffy ground of like, are we going to be in number 6?
Right.
And people are kind of worried about that. And I get that. But a lot of asexual people are autistic. And I think it does a disservice to not only a large part, perhaps, of the community, but maybe one of the more vulnerable ones, like one of the ones that maybe needs some more understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people love talking over autistic people. That is something I have learned in these past few months. And it doesn't matter what it is. Like, if you want to start a fire on the internet, bring up the puzzle pieces, which autistic people fucking hate. And watch non-autistic people get very angry about why autistic people need to shut up about it. And I'm like, well, just stop using the damn puzzle pieces and this wouldn't happen. Like, so yeah, like I feel it's important to give like a decent voice to autistic asexuals. I love you guys. You're awesome.
You are an awesome spokesperson for them, if I say so.
To that end, if somebody is watching this right now and they just found out or about to find out, like, what should they file away for being in a relationship with an autistic person? I know every individual is an individual, and I really don't want to stereotype or generalize, but is there anything that you and your partner have learned through this experience that you feel might be useful?
I mean, one thing is obviously the communication thing. Another thing is like I hate like the functioning, but a lot of it fluctuates. Like if I'm having like a really like A+ day, I can do incredible things. If I am having like definitely like a D- day, sentences no longer have grammar. Like everyone's like it's either verbal or nonverbal, and a lot of people are somewhere in the middle. And sometimes it's gone. Like I don't have that. So like maybe it will depend on the individual. Maybe some people don't, yo-yo quite as much, but things will be different. And just because everything was really easy this one month does not mean today it will be. And I think people have a hard time accepting that because everyone's got this idea that everyone's trying to pull one over on someone. So if you're like, I really can't do this thing, and it's normally something so ridiculously benign to a lot of people, like phone calls aren't going to happen. If we go for a phone call, there's 100% chance that I'm going to be like having a very intense moment somewhere, and it's not going to be great. And that kind of thing too happens. Like a lot of reactions do not seem, I'm told, proportionate to what is going on. Like, so we kind of have to accept what the person is telling you is real. And also, maybe it depends on the individual again, but like the way I show like caring and concern for people is a little different, and some people would probably feel very abandoned sometimes. Like I don't know what to do. If someone is upset, like there's a lot of platitudes, and I don't like them very much because it feels really inauthentic. Like the way I show someone I really like them is not, self-disclosure in conversations. It's I will drive you all over Austin for several months to every doctor's appointment until they figure out what is going on with this thing. Like that's how. So if you're like,
how you express care,
right? So like maybe if someone's really upset, I'm not gonna have the right reaction or the expected reaction. So sometimes I think in like mixed relationships between like autistic and non-autistic people, or even like ADHD and non-ADHD, any of these things, is learn to see things differently, maybe, because you don't really look for these, like show like the way people show their emotions or that they care. It's like this code, and it's just there, and you just recognize it. And if the codes are different, it might involve like recalibrating what those things are going to look like. Like I love very, very, very deeply, but outwardly it's very difficult sometimes for me to show that. And yeah, I think if you're in a relationship with someone is like got a different brain wiring, like there's a lot of learning and kind of unlearning, but I think it's kind of worth it. Like a lot of like autistic people are kind of awesome, and the first date is not going to go great, perhaps. My first dates never turned into second dates. For a reason, I am sure. But like it's stressful. And if people are stressed, they're not their best. And if like I'm stressed, I'm very not my best. So I think like trying to give people a chance and the benefit of the doubt. Like if someone does something that is incredibly hurtful, is there a good outcome reason for it to be hurtful? Because if not, there's a good chance it's just not what they meant. So I think you've got to be kind of flexible. And I mean, I'll admit, like I'm a lot. I love my husband a lot. But like when I had like the sort of burnout thing, it was really bad. And I'm still not great right now, but I was like I was not useful. And he had to pick up a lot of the slack. And I still feel kind of terrible about that. But like, it's just different. And but I think it's rewarding. And like they always talk about the deficits or whatever, but there's a lot of positives. Like the autistic people I've met are fiercely like loyal and like care a lot. Like I will not bullshit my partner. If I say I will do a thing, I would literally break the earth to do the thing. Like the follow through is so strong. And like
we talked last time you were here just about how this part of yourself impacts your sense of style, your eye for fashion. I mean, some of the just ways you view the world, and I have to imagine that comes into the way you view people, the way you view people that you love and relationships as well. That you're just seeing it from perhaps a different angle from your partner and from other people in his life. But that there's still that there's really a lot of value in that different angle, that different perspective.
I mean, I love being in a relationship that has both, because we get to see, like, it's like the app, the Be My Eyes app. Like, we get to be each
Uh-huh.
other's eyes, and I'm like, look at this amazing thing, and you get to enjoy so much more. Like, I'm gonna fixate on weird little details that most people do not care about normally, but like he gets to enjoy that too, and I get to enjoy like all the stuff, that like he sees, and it kind of opens up a lot, which I think
Mhm.
is kind of amazing. Like, I was reading an article on like the whole manic pixie dream girl trope, which is, people have been friend zoned. I've been manic pixie dream girled like my whole life.
Sure.
Like, I'm a
Yeah.
broken, cynical man. Fix me. And I'm like, mm. and
I
yeah,
don't
like
even like the Smiths.
right. But like someone wrote like that was like a lot of the things that get put into those characters are like sort of like AFAB-y autistic traits, and like, yeah, I think people kind of like end up looking for that, and it can be really fun, but kind of miss the people. I think people miss the people a lot of the time,
Sure.
but or at least that's what it seems like. Someone's talking about the Love on the Spectrum show. I haven't watched it. And on about like the cute, like weird music, and they were like, these are adults dating, and it's got the same soundtrack that one would use for an adorable baby elephant, and I'm like,
Oh god.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's
And
it's a whole attempt. It like there wasn't like that like star that's like all like there was an attempt like yay representation, also stop please.
Yeah.
like I know some people like it had like a mixed bag. Like some people were like no, and some people were like, I thought it was kind of cute, and but yeah, it's like I think people kind of maybe miss the humanity sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if secular sexuality is here to do anything, I guess it's to shine a spotlight on a just diverse type of person, a diverse type of relationship, and the different types of people that love each other in different ways. So I appreciate that you came on to share all of this with us. Before we let you go, I want to see if there are any particular resources you'd like to recommend, and make sure that people know how to find you online around the web.
I think I put them on my wee slide. So the autistic advocacy.org is the autistic self-advocacy network. It is an organization run by autistic people, and it has a lot of really good information on there, and they do like like a lot of work for the autistic community. AWN network is the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, because they found like a lot of differences between the gender, but it's more called like atypical at this point because gender is messy. And especially like if you were not a cis white male, that one is a really good place to look. And Neuroclastic is a platform it's about autism. It's written primarily by autistic and neurodiverse people. And if you want to look into anything like autism related, trying to talk to the autistic community, because a lot of the lived experience is very different to the textbook experience. And Neuroclastic is great for everything. Actually, if you're in a relationship, there's a lot of articles on communication problems. There's like a lot of information there. And if you think you might be autistic or on the spectrum or neurodiverse in any way, they have a great directory for people, diagnosticians that specialize and have been recommended for adult diagnostic, because there is not a lot for grown-ups. This is the most frustrating thing. Everything you look up for is going to be about your child. And I'm like, but what about me? And like part of that is like organizations like Autism Speaks is not great. And
It's just
there's so much effort
Yeah.
putting into like this tragedy narrative, like where parents are still being told to grieve when they
Right.
get a diagnosis for their kids. And I'm like, your kid can still be amazing. Like even if even nonverbal people have a lot of understanding. Everyone thinks that people don't, but like there's a lot of nonverbal autistic advocates out there, and not being able to speak or whatever. Speaking is not like a prerequisite for a fulfilling life.
Mm.
Wow.
And,
That hits really hard. That's
Yeah.
a beautiful way of terming it.
Yeah, and I think like find autistic people. If you're a parent and you've got a child, there are a lot of Facebook groups like autism inclusivity, which is a bit like the Find My Eyes app. It's like Be My Eyes. It's like, my kid keeps doing this. Why? And it's like, well, is this situation happening? Well, yes, we have fluorescent lights. And I'm like, I'll look into that first. And it's kind of helpful. And they're there for grown-ups too.
Wonderful.
I cannot remember. It's like a screener that I want to say, if you go like the site's name's not great, but like aspitests.com or .org. It's like a long test. It's one of the screeners a lot of the doctors will use. They used it as part of like my diagnosis, and you can fill it out yourself. There's a lot of science behind it. It's been revised because of like gender biases and everything else. It won't necessarily give you a diagnosis, but it will give you a good indicator of whether or not it's something to look into. And if you're curious and have like diagnoses in the past that don't fit, a lot of like women non-binary people have ended up with a laundry list of bizarre diagnoses. I have not filled my bingo card entirely in my lifetime, but like I got.
There's still time on the clock. Yeah.
I still need the BPD. I haven't had borderline personality. That's the most common one a lot of people get. But but if you think like maybe misdiagnosis has happened, like check in on it and write things down, because the process can be kind of intimidating, and if you don't have it written down, it can be hard. And because I went through one interview that was a train wreck, and then I redid it with notes. But like write everything down, and also definitely look for people who work with adults specifically, because it's different. There's not a lot out there, and not a lot of people know what to look for. They're like, you're not a 4-year-old boy who likes trains. Get out of here.
You're not autistic.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, I should mention to anybody listen to the podcast that we'll make sure all of these links are in the show notes to this episode. But also, I guess I need to make sure to get a copy of that title card, because that picture is fantastic.
Right, with
for anybody listening to get to see it.
Oh my goodness. I love that so much.
That is just magical. Thank you to our crew for getting that back up there. I also want to take a moment to share the crew cam
Crew cam.
all the people
Thank you,
that go into
everyone.
putting this together.
Yeah, I think we all took turns ducking out of the screen for some reason or another, and they were right on top of it. So
cobbling together a coherent broadcast, even as all of our individual computers fall apart and they shake their heads at us from afar. We're incredibly grateful to them, and incredibly grateful to everybody watching. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I guess this is that time, that moment to encourage everybody out there, allosexual or asexual, neurotypical or atypical, to go out and give themselves a big old orgasm, or better yet, give somebody else one.